E karakia tātou. Kia uru mai a hau ora, a hau kaha, a hau maia, ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho. Rere hau, pai maariri. Bring forth the winds of good health, the winds of strength, the winds of courage, from above, from below, from within, from without, for goodwill and eternal peace. Tēnā tātou, rauranga tira mai, e hui mai mō tēnei hui whakahirehira. Nau mai, whakatau mai. Ko mata whaura te maunga, ko ōhau te awa, ko ngā tipiki o te iwi. I te taho o tōku pāpa, no ngā puhi a hau. I te taho o tōku māma, no ngai te rangi me te whānau āpanui. He tangata whenua a hau. Whakapapa tells me I am tangata whenua. Te o Waitangi confirms that same premise, that I am tangata whenua. Then why are we treated as second-class citizens in our own whenua? That's the situation for us as Māori. Right now, the situation for Māori whānau and Māori workers is tough. New numbers out last week confirmed that unemployment is rising much faster for Māori than it is for Pākehā, and that Māori are more than twice likely to be out of work, as evidenced by the public service job cuts activated by this government. I just had to think about it when you see the numbers come out regularly. And the numbers started about 4 months. I was thinking about heading up toward, you'll lose your job on July the 1st. So prior to that, you've been told 4 months in advance, you'll lose your job on July the 1st. So if you're talking about 3,950 have lost their job, well, will you lose their jobs? And if you're hell-bent on productivity like this government is, that's 3,950 jobs over 4 months where no one is doing anything. You can bet your bottom dollar for that. They're saying, well, what the hell, why should I be? I'm going to lose my job anyway, so I'm not doing anything. Never mind about those people, there are also the rest of the office that are actually in mourning and grieving for their colleagues and wondering, what the hell do we do to help our fellow workers? He tangata whenua hau, but so what? Racism, exploitation and discrimination within the workplace and in community has become normal and is reimagined as unconscious bias. Somebody said that was being biased when you're asleep. And that's pretty much what it is, if you can't see it. Another Member of Parliament, let's not mention names, said that Māori are double dipping and making huge demands on the taxpayers. And yes, we are. We are making huge demands on the taxpayers in every hospital because our health statistics are terrible, in every school where we have the lowest achievement levels in the country, in prisons where the lines are forever out the door, and in the benefit queue. Yes, I agree, we are double dipping. We don't want to be double dipping that way, but we are. This government is attacking te tiriti o Waitangi, undermining te reo Māori, questioning Māori interests in whenua through the review of the resource consent process, although across the board, tangata whenua rights have been stripped away. This is a whakataukihi from a rangatira in Ngāti Toa. Tu whitia te hopo, mai rangitia te angi tū. Feel the fear, but do it anyway. I think it's a fantastic thing. Tu whitia te hopo, mai rangitia te angi tū. Feel the fear, but do it anyway. On behalf of the NZCTU Rūnanga, I'm asking everyone here to be bold, to be brave, and to step off the edge with us. Fight for Māori workers and for policies for change. Together we can ensure that te tiriti is honoured, that Māori are recognised as tangata whenua of our own land, and that equality is guaranteed for Kaimahi Māori. We need to realise the power of tangata whenua, workers and communities rising up together to demand a better future where Kaimahi Māori are valued and respected. If you happen to be one of the privileged people that went to Ngāroa Wāhia, to the Huia Motu up there, you would have been amazed, overwhelmed, but amazed. Nobody thought that with 2 months' notice, 10,000 or so people would turn up. Not only Māori. Everyone there that we saw, and some of the people were very young people who came and brought their children because they thought it was a historical event that their children should be part of. To whitia te hopo, mai rangatia te angi too. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Okay, let's look at another whakatauki. Ko te pai tawhiti whaia kia tata, ko te pai tata whakamaua kia tina. Now, if you look out in the horizon, not now, of course, when the light is there, when you look out, you'll see the horizon, which is kind of a line that away from you. That's the pai tawhiti. And when you're looking out towards the pai tawhiti, and we're setting a vision for ourselves, that's where we're looking. That's how far out we're looking. We're looking at that vision right there on the horizon. And what we want to do is pull that vision closer to us. And that's what we're asking you to do, to come along with us for that hikoi. Well, it might be more than a hikoi, it might be more of a slog and a jump and a run and all the rest of it. But to bring that pai tawhiti closer to us. Look to the distant horizon, think outside the square, be imaginative but also practical. And when you find those amazing thoughts and ideas, draw them close and harness their vitality and interest. That's what this project's about. This is about finding innovative ways to uplift our people, protect their rights, and create a better future for our mokopuna. Over the next few years, we want to mobilise and join the growing movement of tangata whenua who are standing united against the government. That is the mahi ahead of us, forcing the government to honour the obligations as a tiriti partner and showing Aotearoa that there is a better way. Have you thought that maybe the vision could start with Māori? Put Māori and Pacific people, who are the people who are struggling most at the moment, at the front of the vision. They're the pai tawhiti. They're our mokopuna that we need to do things for, because at the moment, they are back there. And anything that has been done education-wise, health-wise, is because they are the reason it needs to happen. But actually the money doesn't go to them. It goes to all these other reasons why it should happen, but actually it doesn't happen for them. So think about that possibility. Tu whitia te hopo, mai rangitia te angi too. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Karawhiua, let it happen.
Kia ora, Laures, has beautifully spoken. Ko Richard Wagstaff aho, I'm the President of the Council of Trade Unions, and welcome all of you. E na mana, e na rio, e na karangatanga maha, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tonight we're here to launch our new project, Reimagining Aotearoa Together, obviously. Before I say anything more, I just want to let you know what will happen after me. We'll be hearing from Jo-Chanelle Pouwhare, an E2 delegate. We'll be hearing from Ben Wylie-van Eerd, a PSA delegate. We'll be hearing from the Reverend Stephen King from St Peter's on Willis, and we'll also be hearing via the screens from Armine Yalnizyan, a Canadian economist, to give us a bit of international perspective. But first, I have some things to say about why we're doing this. We need fundamental change here in this country if we want things to get better. It's as simple as that. It's time to look beyond the narrow confines of the policy straitjacket adopted by successive governments over the last 4 decades. We need to expand our thinking and position ourselves to take the longer term view instead of the short term, to benefit the many instead of the few, to put people and the planet first. Reimagining Aotearoa together is about that thinking so we can secure a vibrant, aspirational future that honours Te Treaty and works for all of us. Working people want us as a nation to be heading in the right direction, a direction where we can all thrive to create a better place to work, a better place to live, a better place to raise a family. We should expect our lives and the lives of our whānau over time and over generations to keep improving. But it's got to the stage where people no longer necessarily expect their children to be better off than they are. Over the past 4 decades, we've adopted a mindset that dominates policy setting, which ensures a small minority rarely prospers and take more than their fair share, while large numbers face poverty, insecurity and indignity on a daily basis. Our workplaces should create an experience for workers that generates mana and pride, respect and collegiality. They should be places where workers are seen as an investment, not a commodity or a cost. But the reality is that too many of our workplaces do not do this. These workplaces are not safe or healthy. They are not paying good wages. Jobs are fast disappearing and more insecure for those who are left. Those who remain are not experiencing what we would call good work. For decades, we've been stumbling in the dark when it comes to workforce planning and training. Now we're living with the consequences and have major skill gaps in vital industries. Take the health sector, doctors, nurses, allied health. Take even construction. Construction held up because we can't get people because we haven't been training them. Our economy is floundering and falling behind. Firms are not productive and we have no plans to build strong industries in sustainable sectors that can foot it with the best internationally. Some industries, such as supermarkets, banking and electricity, are effectively monopolies, meaning fat profit margins for the shareholders while rising prices greet the rest of us. Our public service is under attack and shrinking while struggling with the weight of demand. Our infrastructure is failing all around us after decades of underinvestment. In a country with plenty of land and timber, we have a chronic shortage of quality and affordable housing. Tangata whenua, as Laures said, Māori have become second-class citizens in their own land, facing systemic racism and economic disadvantage. And now even our nation's founding document, Te Treaty o Waitangi, is being actively questioned and undermined. For years, New Zealand has sold itself internationally as a clean, green place, and this image helps our exports and our international standing. But our environment is under immense pressure, as you all know, and the new government has reversed the tentative progress we had been making on decarbonisation. The impact of climate change were laid bare in 2023 with the Auckland floods and Cyclone Gabrielle. These kinds of events will only become more frequent, yet there is no plan in place for how we should navigate them, only a plan to make things worse. Much to our shame, growing inequality is about the only global measure where we're in the leading bunch. Aotearoa is no longer a land for the many, it's becoming a land for the few. That inequality corrodes our quality of life throughout society. To make matters worse, our leaders seem unable to paint a credible, aspirational, longer-term picture of where we want to be and where we want to get to as a society. There is no plan to create a modern economy that is high-wage, high-skill, highly productive and green. You know, there's nothing in what I've just said that's new. It's been clear now for decades we haven't been prepared to make the changes needed to address these entrenched challenges. Working people have become sick and tired of what seems like an endless cycle of failure to address basic issues. We seem to be stuck on a revolving conveyor belt that we can't get out of, going around in a circle. We seem to be making a few gains here and there, only to return an election cycle later to the same old problems with the same old failed solutions put forward, and a feeling that we are falling further and further behind the rest of the world. The new government loves to talk about going back, and it immediately took us backwards fast by undoing as much as it could. But unwinding progress to things like industry policy or industry bargaining, pay equity, cancelling straight ferries or water reform and so on hasn't miraculously solved all of those problems. They're still there, they've just put us back on a path that leads deeper into the mire we've been in. Our current government gets excited about targets, lower debt and putting more people behind bars. This is their vision for transforming Aotearoa. It's clear that they have to go. And the sooner the better, because they have no ability to imagine Aotearoa as anything more than the status quo. This has to be a one-term government. Because if we continue down this path, we'll just get more of the same. Unless we change what we do, we can't expect to get different results. Of course, another way is possible and necessary, but to get there we need to have the courage to think outside the small square we've trapped ourselves inside for 4 decades. We need to look at how other countries are delivering a better quality of life for their citizens. We need to accept that we are sliding down the ranks internationally because we have chosen the wrong path. While those countries ahead of us have been much smarter, been more strategic and more focused on taking deliberate actions to lift their game. Instead of taking their hands off the wheel and hoping invisible hands would steer things to prosperity, those countries and economies that have prospered have grasped the need for long-term thinking, investment and active government support. It's time we reflected honestly on our position, learn from other countries and change tack before we inflict more damage on our people and on our country. We desperately need a longer-term plan that not only details a desirable destination for all of us, but crucially demonstrates a pathway that supports us all to get there from here in good shape, or what we call through a just transition. That's why this evening I'm announcing the CTU's Reimagining Aotearoa Together initiative. It's an initiative to begin a wide-ranging discussion with workers and unions and progressive allies who share our determination to make Aotearoa a better, fairer, more prosperous country socially, culturally and economically. Creating higher expectations is part of what unions do. As you all know, the trade unionists here, we lift people's game, we lift their expectations. And we do that not only in the workplace, but in the community and across the motu. We intend to do just that with this initiative. So for the rest of this year, for 2024, we'll be engaging in a deliberate discussion about what matters most and what needs to be done about it. We are going out to workers and their unions and to communities to talk about what we want Aotearoa to become and how we're going to get there from here. We will begin this with a series of structured forums in centres around the country in June and July. We will be reaching out to community allies, NGOs and individuals to get their input as well. Here at the CTU, we know a better way is not only possible, it's essential if we are to realise our potential as a nation, each and every one of us. We are determined to find a better way that is for the many and not just the few. We hope you will all join us in building a future we can all be proud of. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And I'll just hand to Jo-Chanelle.
Kia ora everybody. My name's Jo-Chanelle Pouwhare. I'm an Eerd delegate. I work for CCS Disability Action. I'm a care and support worker. I've been asked to speak on to use on the reality of what the workers are facing in this country at the moment with this government. As we all know, it's pretty tough to get a job out there, finding one, keeping one, and living comfortably on the jobs that we do have available. It's frustrating, you know, to the truth, we've been overworked, underpaid and undervalued across many sectors. Unions have been fighting, and I have been part of that fight in the year that I've been a delegate. It's been amazing what we've been able to achieve for my organisation. However, you know, they've been fighting hard for us to get better deals. My Eerd union colleagues, the security guards and those cleaners, we're finally going to negotiate a fair pay agreement last year. But this government took our rights away and repealed the FPA legislation. Yeah, very shame is right. A tragedy. I mean, and it was a kick in the ass and the guts, and they need a kick in the ass. Next, the extended 90-day trial to all workers to make us feel even more insecure. There goes the mental health going up, you know, and then they reduced the minimum wage in real terms while cutting support to those on benefits. Now, I have to share this story. I have a friend who went and got a job because she was made to, solo mother, 3 children, and they were all of the age to be able to stay home, still going to school. She got a job, a night shift job. In the first 2 weeks that she got her pay, she made $26.50 more than what she did on the benefits staying home with her 3 kids. So she ended up throwing in that job to be able to have quality time with her kids. You know, and then those older teenage kids shouldn't be bringing up their kids, you know, the brothers and sisters. That's intergenerational trauma. Lived it, hated it. You know. So you could say working people at the coalface, like me, don't feel things are going our way. No. Instead of being acknowledged as the people who keep this country running, you know, I call it a Ferris wheel, you go merry-go-round. Yeah, we sidelined and ignored by those in power. And it's a fact. People are still working in unsafe conditions and even dying on the job. If you look at the forestry sector, you know, auntie, people working hard to provide for their whānau shouldn't be living in poverty. They shouldn't have to work 2 or more jobs just to put food on the table. But that's a reality. Pay the bills and keep a roof over the heads of their kids. More and more whānau are struggling just to, you know, get by. The rich keep getting richer, and I've always said that with every national government, you know. However, but everyone else keeps getting poorer, you know, but we can do ourselves up, you know. It's disgraceful, aunties, it's disgraceful. As workers, we deserve more. We deserve secure work that pays well. Then we'll have our people staying in New Zealand and not going to Australia. You know, they're getting paid. I actually looked it up myself. I'm getting $4 less than the starting rate of the same job that I'm doing over there. And it's just wrong, you know. Instead of trying to make things better for working people, this government is doing the opposite, as we all know, and are experiencing at the moment. They are attacking us left, right and centre. You know, I'm a support worker. I love the work I do because I know it's important to people out there. It's needed. And it's also important to the whānaus because they're the ones that are also struggling. I'm in the disability sector, and I'm sure you have met people with disabilities. There's going to be a whole country full of mental health disabilities soon if we carry on with this government and what they're doing. You know, but the government doesn't really feel like they appreciate the work that I do as a support worker. Sunday just gone, they had a rally outside Te Papa, where a lot of my colleagues, unfortunately I had to work, I wasn't able to attend, you know, protesting had a meeting where, here in Wellington because government has just got rid of the pay equity task force at a time when we are waiting for them to settle the care and support workers pay equity claim, you know, which has been unresolved for 2 years and is awaiting government funding. So they're going to put $1.5 billion to make a super prison, isn't it, in Waikato, and they're going to take 2 years to just over 7% of essential workers, for essential workers during the lockdown. You do the math. If they really valued what we do, they wouldn't be doing this kind of thing. You know, they are undermining the treaty, as we've all heard in the last 2 speakers, trying to divide us up. And I mean, you know, you sent Winston Peters over to what countries to see what they're doing to handle the war that's going on over there. You need to be worrying about the war that might start here with our people. You know, it's an all-out assault on workers' rights, Māori's rights, human rights, and women's rights. We will not lie down. You know, they should just call us a prostitute. Okay? and we won't accept this. We must work together to get change and make work better in Aotearoa. Working people know that there must be a better way. You know, all of us, we just need to come together and make that change.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Dr. Ben Wylie-van Eerd. I am a physicist working at Callahan Innovation, and I'm also a delegate of the Public Service Association. At the PSA, we're of course concerned about the large number of public servants who are having their jobs taken away in the middle of a recession. A lot of the discussion lately has been about the cost of the public service, but I think it's also really important to talk about the benefits that come from a strong public service and the benefits that we are losing through this process. The current government talks about these cuts like they're essential, but they're not. They are a choice. We could choose instead not to cut taxes, for example. And while the benefits of public services are basically and broadly spread among New Zealanders, the benefits of tax cuts will mostly accrue to the elite. It's a case of taking from the many and giving to the few, which is a choice. The government's approach to the cuts is also indiscriminate. They're not making choices about which services they want to cut, which services they want to reduce, which services they want to keep, or even which services they would want to expand because they are of high value. They're just telling every ministry to make cuts. That inevitably means that vital services upon which New Zealanders rely are disappearing. I'll go through some examples that we already know about, with the mind that there are more to come that we can't describe yet because they haven't been made. But some that we already know about are making cuts to protecting our borders, which risks damaging our agriculture industry, which is our biggest exporter. This is a dangerous move to be making. We are making cuts to caring for New Zealanders living with disabilities, which means that we are not upholding the dignity of the New Zealand people. We're making cuts to ensuring that the public service keeps private information secure, which will increase risk for everybody who deals with the public service, and which in fact is everybody. We're making cuts to supporting Māori development and well-being, which will prevent us from meeting our treaty commitments. We're making cuts to cracking down on online scams and child abuse, which is failing to protect our most vulnerable citizens. And we're making cuts to safeguarding our conservation land and taonga species, which risks losing what makes us unique on the world stage. And we are making cuts to science. And I'll talk a little bit more at length about science since that is the field in which I work. It's a very competitive world out there in the 21st century. You know, if we want to keep being a prosperous nation, we need to be able to do things better than they can be done anywhere else in the world. We're not going to achieve that by importing and copying what's being done overseas. We need to be inventing new products, new services, new knowledge, new way of doing things here in New Zealand, in Aotearoa. We need to be inventing new products and services. We need to be creating new businesses and new industries. And all of that starts with science. Research, invention, development, commercialisation. In New Zealand, we spend only half of what the average country in the OECD does on research and development. And that's a very concerning outlook for the future of this country. Science is a classic case for public investment as well, because it creates enormous benefits, but those benefits are hard to predict and they are hard to capture, so they're less attractive to private investors, making it a good case for the public investment. The taxpayer benefits from broad increases in the economy, the national economy, more so than a private investor does, and the public is more better placed to benefit from the environmental and social goods the public science can create for us all. The government, the current government, it talks a big game on driving economic growth and productivity. It talks a big game on facing the challenges of climate change and taking that very seriously. But the way that you demonstrate that you are taking these things seriously is by making investments toward them. Instead, there are 120 jobs slated to grow across Callahan Innovation and NIWA, which are our science organisations which are focused on growing industry and protecting the environment, adapting to climate change. in all likelihood, a lot of these people, we're going to lose them out of the country and out of the science system entirely. This is not hypothetical. I've spoken to many of them. They are looking to leave if they lose their jobs, because there aren't other equivalent jobs for them to do here in this country. That'll be a great loss. And it's also not limited to Callaghan Innovation and NIWA. There are science roles going at other government departments as well, such as Ministry for Primary Industries and the Department of Conservation. Between losing these jobs, these people, losing science infrastructure investment from Wellington Science City, and losing science funding in the National Science Challenges, we could be looking here at the largest cuts to science for 30 years. But we need to double our investment in R&D to bring ourselves up, to keep up with the rest of the developed world. And we need to keep up with the rest of the developed world in order to grow the economy and make it more productive. What we need is not cuts, what we need is investment. We know that countries which spend more on R&D have higher economic growth, they have higher productivity. That means better jobs, better wages, and it means less impact on the natural environment and our natural resources. That is the future I want for New Zealand. That is the future I think we all want for New Zealand. And if we want that future, then we have to choose to make the investments that get us there. If you want to grow more crops, everybody knows you need to plant more seeds. So let's plant the seeds of a better economy. Let's invest in science. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, everyone. My name is Stephen King, and I am one of the priests at St. Peter's Anglican Church on the corner of Willis and Gusney Street. Now, St. Peter's has been situated there at the heart of Aotearoa for 176 years. I've only been there 5. And St. Peter's is a place that strives to put into practice our love of God and neighbour by embracing and including everyone, regardless of sex, gender, sexual orientation, race or faith. It's always been a place that's been strong on social justice, and this has been a fundamental aspect of the church's mission and ministry from its very beginning in 1848 until now. St. Peter's founded the Chinese Anglican Mission in 1902 to minister to the Chinese community in Aotearoa. In 1904, it founded the Wellington City Mission to minister to the needy in our city. And in 1969, it was one of the founding churches that founded DCM, who's now one of the leading providers for social support for our most vulnerable citizens in the city. On weekdays at St. Peter's, in partnership with the Free Store, volunteers visit over 60 cafes and bakeries across our city, collecting their surplus food each day. 480,000 items of fresh quality food are redistributed annually by Free Store at our car park to over 100 people a day from all walks of life, including the homeless, unemployed, students and the elderly. On Saturday mornings, we host, in partnership with DIA, Wellington's Ethnic Food Bank, which supports our new migrant communities. And DIA serves over 60 to 80 families a week through this service. That some of our community live in deprivation and poverty is not a new phenomenon. That deprivation and poverty disproportionately affect certain communities more than others is not a new phenomenon. The collective experience of organisations like the City Mission, like DCM, like the Sisters of Compassion, like St. Peter's, like the Labour Movement, all who work in providing assistance to those in need and to overcome those underlying systemic issues that leave families in need, their work and experience is testimony to the reality of this. 200-ish years of compassionate response to the presenting need and passionate advocacy for change in the system that perpetuates that need. Faith groups, community groups, organised labour and successive governments and at central and local levels, all working in response to this reality. And yet, it seems that no amount of effort or innovation in response or advocacy has made a significant improvement. And in fact, as we are hearing and as we know, at this moment it seems to be getting worse. Now, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who has been struggling more and more to accept that the assurances from the experts that a little bit more here and a little bit less there, that tinkering, tuning, recalibrating and restructuring will deliver the change that needs to happen to make Aotearoa a place that lives up to the highest aspirations that so many of us have. My wife had a saying when our kids were little, but it seemed to be true then and has been proven true to me ever since. She used to say, if it sounds stupid when you explain it to a 3-year-old, then it probably is. Probably is means that we need to question. We need to ask why. We need to ask why like kids ask why. Why is it that for the economy to get better, that more people need to lose their jobs? Why is the economy better when more children are hungry at school? Why? Now, I get the macroeconomic rationale for that, right? But why is that more important than the social cost? Why? We need to ask for explanations. Explanations, explain it to me in a way that makes sense and in a way that doesn't rely heavily on condescension that I don't get it or that somehow I'm naive. And please don't try and explain it to me if because is a big part of the explanation. Because my kids didn't like it and I didn't like it when the answer was because. This week, I've advocated for someone facing eviction. I've been working with people whose lives are being turned upside down and inside out because of the situation in the public service. There are people around St. Peter's every day who struggle, who deserve answers as to when the system will begin to work for them and not against them. A final story. In 1989, my parents went on their first big overseas trip. My dad was in his early 60s, and they went to the Northern Hemisphere, and on the way home, they went to LA. And they went to Hollywood and Universal Studios, and poor old Dad got dragged off to the Guggenheim. And when I asked him when he came back at the end of his trip, what did he think about LA? His answer surprised me, and I've always remembered it. He said to me, you know, Stephen, there's so much wealth in that place, but you know what? They have people living on the street. In 1989, my dad was horrified by that. And he was horrified because he'd never seen it here. Now, my dad worked for 30 years, not in an ivory tower, not in an office building. He worked for 30 years in Blair, Allen and Wakefield Street in the produce markets, right? And in 1989, he was shocked to see homeless people in Los Angeles. Last week, my best mate Mark came back from visiting his family in the UK. First time back since COVID, and he came back through San Francisco and did all the tourist things. And I said, hey, what's San Francisco like? I haven't been there for ages. And he goes, well, we did all the tourist things, but you know what? We think we have homelessness. He says they've got whole streets of homeless people living in tents on the footpath. 30 years after my dad was appalled at the existence of homelessness in the United States. And Mark, my mate, was appalled by the scale of homelessness now, still. In those 30 years in this country, homelessness has been normalised. 30 years of compassionate response. 30 years of passionate advocacy for change. And where have we landed? If we keep on doing what we've been doing, Why would we think that we won't be walking past rows of tents on our streets in 30 years from now? It's time for the discussion. It's time to keep asking why until the answers make sense. The Reimagining Aotearoa Together campaign excites me because I'm not the only one who wants to ask why. And this campaign is a chance for all of us to push for answers that make sense. And we need answers that will make a difference. Thank you.
Kia ora, Stephen, that was great. The next speaker we have is Armine Yalnizyan. She is a leading voice on Canada's economic scene. She is the Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers and writes a bi-weekly business column for Canada's second largest daily paper, the Toronto Star. She served as a senior economic policy advisor to the federal government in 2018 and 19, was a member of a high-level task group on women in the economy during the pandemic, and is regularly called on to advise federal, provincial and municipal elected officials in Canada. Armine has helped shape and advance the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives in Equality project from 2006 to 2016, provided weekly business commentary for Canada's public broadcaster on TV and radio from 2011 to 2018, and led the Canadian Association for Business Economics from 2013 to 2019. And she's stayed up till halfway through the night to speak to us tonight, Armine. So thank you so much. We've had Armine here before at CTU conferences and at PSA, and she's a wonderful person as well as a great speaker. Over to you, Armine.
Thank you so much. Listening to what you've all been speaking about in the last hour or so, it's super grim. And looking forward, not only talking about what has happened in the past, but looking forward to what more is to come, seems even more grim. And look, normally I don't do speeches in the middle of the night. I love CTU, and I would do almost anything for you, but I should have thought twice about what it might mean to be speaking to you at 2:45 in the morning. So cut me a little bit of slack. I am well aware that I am the only thing between you and going out for a pint. And I am well aware that I'm the only thing between me and my bed. But I have been asked to talk to you about what we're doing in Canada and how the poly crisis that is unfolding all over the world can be tackled. And the need for care, the cuts in care, climate change, increasingly divided and very frightening geopolitics. I'm sure you know that half the world is going to the polls this year, and there is an autocrat on every menu. And there is this extraordinary right-wing backlash everywhere. Very hard politics staring us in the face and doing much more than staring.
Reversing women's rights, human rights, Indigenous rights, reversing progress we were making on climate change, reversing progress we were making on making change, period. But even in the grimmest of moments, there are points of light all over the world, countries and states and provinces where things are actually getting better because of the work that a handful of people have been able to bring together. And even in the grimmest of grim moments, we have been able to, when we come together with shared purpose, actually make the impossible possible, make life better. Like after the Second World War, out of those ashes came possibly the most prosperous period for the greatest number of people on the surface of the planet. And make no mistake, we are facing something very similar to that right now, not only a poly crisis of threats, but a crisis of policy, of leadership, even of humanity, as you've all talked about. We desperately need a new Green Deal to make sure that we can wean ourselves off the carbon that is creating a crisis every few weeks around the globe with fires, floods, droughts, and incredible windstorms. The world is becoming uninsurable. Security has never been less sure. And we absolutely need to create an agenda of economic security that delivers not only prosperity, but more humanity. While we're looking for all those good examples, let me point to Canada. Canada just inked its first nationwide early learning and childcare deal focused on bringing affordable, even universal care to Canadian families with good jobs, because the conditions of work are the conditions of care. We just introduced a national school food program. You were just talking about children going to school hungry, which will start in a very piecemeal fashion, but it is committed to making sure no child goes hungry at school. And we have just introduced the most aggressive approach to social housing since the 1970s, where we're talking about building over 3.5 million homes in the next little while. But believe me, there is plenty of pressure to reverse all that in real time today by other levels of government that are deeply conservative, and replicating what has happened to you so recently as you lost so many important gains like fair pay agreements and more just taxation, and even a really progressive way of looking at that old chestnut called productivity concerns, which actually usually translates to just, hey, you should work more. So I want to remind you of what we need all around the world, and what we are talking about all around the world is pretty much the same. That's why we're looking over our shoulders as who's doing what. And what I have noticed in the last few years is the enormous potential of the care economy in the role of delivering a future that is good for everyone. Let me explain to you why. Anywhere that had a baby boom after the Second World War and saw birth rates fall is going to be reliant on the smallest size of the working age cohort we have seen in 60 years. But instead of there being a background rate of growth of 6% because we are rebuilding the economy after a war effort, we're looking at a background economy of about 1 to 2% because we've got the biggest cohort of old people in the economy, and old people live on retirement incomes. They don't need to buy as much. Every economy around the world is propelled by household spending, and old people are a drag. And as we get more and more, I mean, I'm sure you know that from your parents, right? Your parents were old, they were a drag, right? Well, we're going to have the biggest cohort of olds in our society that we have ever seen in history, and the smallest group of working age people to support, to pay the taxes for, and to work for. The people that are work for everybody, the people that are, including the people who are too young, too old, and too sick to work. So that requires care. That requires the work that most of your members do. That requires care for the young. It requires care for the old. It requires care for the sick, both in mind and body. It requires public transit and housing. It requires all these things that we do for one another because markets can't, notwithstanding what we have heard for the last 40 years since Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan came to power. Markets can't do everything. Governments aren't always the problem. Sometimes they are the solution. So reversing 40 years of more market, less government is not going to be easy. Narratives don't change in just a few years, but demographics is forcing us everywhere to look at the role of care. And guess what? I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but in Canada, the care economy is the largest industrial part of the economy of any. Taking health and social assistance and education, putting them together. So the creation and nurturing of mind and body, which is the care economy, is bigger, 3 times bigger than oil and gas. It's 1.5 times bigger than manufacturing, which includes all sorts of manufacturing. It's a juggernaut, and it is the way 1 in 5 Canadian workers earns a living. There is no rival to it in terms of how important it is just for the pocketbooks of the workers, and to make sure that when they go to work, you can go to work. Because what we saw in the pandemic is without these essential workers, everything grinds to a halt. They are the economic foundation. The care economy is the economic foundation to the bigger economy, just like roads and bridges and water and utility systems. And what is fascinating when you are looking at 1 in 5 workers, 21% in Canada of workers who work in the care economy, you realize you have the numbers to have the next backbone of the middle class in the early 21st century, just as manufacturing was the backbone of the middle class in the 50s to the 1970s. Now we have the opportunity, if we make every job a good job in the care economy, we have the opportunity to actually build not only prosperity and resilience to the economy, but providing the foundation for what every party says they want, which is economic growth. You don't provide that foundation, and you are literally leaving money on the table. You are losing out on what everybody says they want. And that's where I want to return to here is what we have to do is make the ideas, the alternatives we bring forward irresistible to any party that is out there. Our perhaps most conservative party is in the province I live in Ontario. It regularly attempts to reverse anything the federal government has done. But there's so much public pressure that this government constantly flip-flops. Maybe that's a lesson. When we can actually point to the things that we all need, that they agree we need, and talk about how to deliver it, we can actually move the needle. We can move the goalposts. We can actually move from a grim future to an actually future of abundance and prosperity and humanity. And that's where I want to leave you today. All around the world, governments are waking up to the growing privatization of the care economy, possibly the last bastion that hadn't been totally commodified. But now there are investors looking at dipping into deeply publicly subsidized efforts to help people that will only grow in an era of incredibly slow growth around the world. The care economy is destined to grow because of sheer demographics, and it's deeply publicly subsidized in a way that there are no similar guarantees in the marketplace, so private equity is moving in. And in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and in the Nordic nations, governments are waking up and saying, wait a minute, if it is public, we must keep it public. That's the only way we're going to move forward without whole systems collapsing. And that is a deeply radical approach to the economy. If it's not already in the market, don't let it go there. And, after 40 years of more market, less government, it is hard to reverse these engines quickly. But that is what we need to work on. And that is what only we can do together. When we work together, we make the impossible possible. The deep indigenous knowledge that New Zealanders and Canadians are privileged to live with remind us we are only passing through this creation. We must steward it, and we must care for what we have. In Canada, our Indigenous population often says 7 generations of the past should be guiding us on how to prepare for 7 generations hence. And that's what we can do together and make it utterly irresistible. I am so delighted to be up in the middle of the night. And I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labors so we can replicate your great success stories here in Canada. Thank you for all you do.
Tēnā tātou. We've had all the opportunity to hear several different amazing kōrero. Finish with a voice of hope, if we can only pull it together. So thank you, Armine. Thank you for your kōrero and your thoughts. And you can go to bed now. So now, e hoa, the job is yours. because from now on the thoughts are, where can you hear more about this? How can you get in touch with the different groups that will be meeting across the country? Keep in touch with the CTU so that we can be sending you messages about this and you can start talking with each other. After this, you have the opportunity to, is there any food left? Finish the food and the drinks, but before you move and have a chance to talk, I thought I'd close with karakia and then you can pretty much do what you like, including zip home if you need to, like me. Okay. Kia ururu mai a hau ora, a hau kaha, a hau maia. Ki runga, ki raro, ki roto, ki waho. Rere hau, pai marire. Kia ora tātou.